Five, four,
Four,
three,
three,
two,
two, one.
one. Coming to you live. It's Lichtman live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, we're getting close. Prediction
Wow.
coming soon, you know, shortly after Labor Day. Haven't nailed down the exact date yet, but it should be within a week after Labor Day. You will hear my final prediction. It goes to the New York Times and then right to this show. You can exclusively get it first as soon as it's released on this show, and you can ask me all the difficult questions you want first of all.
Wow, I could smell it in the air, Dad.
Yeah, smell the excitement, and we'll apprise you of when it's coming and when this show will be. It could be a special show, so stand by.
What did Trump say? Stand back and stand by.
Yeah, but
About the
don't
Proud
stand
Boys. Oh,
back.
okay. Don't stand by. Just stand by. Don't stand back
And don't engage in an insurrection.
right. Don't engage in an insurrection. Don't be a proud boy, but wait for the prediction, right?
You got it. Those are the three watchwords.
Apologize for not being live last week. I caught COVID, Dad.
Oh,
Unfortunately.
I didn't give it to you.
No, you did not give it to me. That is true. I don't know who gave it to
I
me.
only had COVID once.
This is my. I'm still recovering from it, so if I'm coughing a little bit, please excuse me. This is my third time having it, so not
Good
great.
thing you're young and healthy.
Good thing, yeah. But that's why we
Want
weren't.
to have it three times at my age.
No, you don't. But luckily, I am past the worst of it for sure. I am very close to better. I'm not 100% better yet, but very close. So that's the good news. But yeah, that's why we weren't here.
None of you are going to catch it.
None of you gonna catch. You can't catch COVID through a screen, no matter what Tucker Carlson tells you. Okay. But we're here this week. We missed the end of the DNC. We missed, although you did do a video on the DNC and you did do a video on the Trump, on the RFK
Right, we
dropout.
covered all that.
We
And
covered
our
all that.
video's got over 100,000 views just on YouTube. I don't know about TikTok.
Is your mic plugged in, Dad? You sound a little weird.
Hang on. Usually I get
There we go. That's much better.
that's better.
Wait, no, no. Then we lost it.
All right, let me get the right one. How's that?
Say
Is
one,
that
two.
better? What?
I think so, but I can't tell. Anyways, let's just keep going.
All right. Usually I get three lights on it. Now I only have one. I don't know why.
I don't know. Okay, well, you
I
said
can unplug. I can do the limits of my techno ability, and that is unplug it and plug it back in.
unplug it and plug it back in. That's good. I'll talk while you go ahead. So, this week, what's been happening this week? We have, the debates between Kamala and Trump up in the air again. Fights between the two sides about the debate. Just today, earlier today, we got a new. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but some sort of new indictment regarding the January 6th charges against Trump. So those are sort of the two new things. Obviously, my dad posted his video about RFK Jr. and the end of the DNC and Kamala's speech. But,
All right, I plugged it back in. Is it any better?
it sounds the same, but it sounds fine, I think. Maybe turn it up a little bit. You can turn it up on that dial a little bit.
How do I do that?
There's a dial on the front of the giant dial on the front of the
Yeah,
microphone.
but all I can do is press it.
No, you can turn it up or down.
I don't know how.
Like, you just take a dial and you turn it up.
I know, but this thing to hang on there, it's button. How's that? Any better?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
All right.
Um, we really need a technical producer with you in DC, man. You struggle when it comes to this technology stuff.
Tell your mom to come down.
Um, it's weird.
All right.
At points it
Can you
sounds like
hear it
it's
okay?
at points it sounds like you're back, and then at points it sounds like you're gone.
Let me try this. This any better?
Maybe you're just getting closer to it. Can you get the mic closer to you?
Yes.
Get the mic as close as humanly possible to you.
Really close now. How does that sound?
Good.
I'm right on top of it. That sounds better.
I don't know. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like the mic's plugged into me, but
Definitely plugged in. I'm getting.
there we go. There we go.
Here we go. Okay. All
So-
right.
okay, I think we got it now.
All right.
All right. So, Dad, your thoughts this week about the debate and the new January 6th indictment.
Yeah. The back and forth about the debate reminds me of the Prince of Denmark, Hamlet's inconclusive soliloquy. To be or not to be, that is the question. To debate or not to debate, that is the question. And to try to decipher what Donald Trump actually is saying and what it means is more difficult than decoding a Babylonian hieroglyphic tablet. It's almost impossible.
Really? No, come on. That's harder. That's harder.
It's harder. So Donald Trump says, I'm not going to debate, right? ABC is biased. It's nasty. They hate me. It's going to be rigged. Plus, she's changing the rules. She wants to have a hot mic. She doesn't want to have the mic muted. Then he says, I really want a hot mic. I really don't want the mic to be muted, but my staff would like to have the mic to be muted. And then after it looks like, again, you can put your own interpretation on what Donald Trump says. It looks like he's backing out of the debate, and we're not to be rather than to be. But then I think it was just today he says, we're going to debate and we agree on the rules. We've come to an agreement with the Harris campaign. And what's the response of the Harris campaign, Sam?
I don't know. I haven't been following this at all.
What do you think? Just guess.
They're like, actually, we
Donald
don't.
Trump says we've come to an agreement, and the Harris campaign says
Just kidding. We don't come to an agreement.
we haven't come to an agreement. You've made this up. Like so much else, Donald, you're trying to speak for us, and we do not have an agreement. Doesn't matter what you say. An agreement requires two sides. Believe it or not, Donald, you just can't declare an agreement, kind of like declaring victory after the 2020 election. It doesn't work. You just can't declare an agreement that doesn't actually exist. So at this point, it remains unclear, and we're getting close to September 10th, whether a debate will come off at all. And if it comes off at all, what will be the ground rules? Now, here's what Donald Trump is doing. Same thing he always does. Does Donald Trump ever lose, Sam, in his own mind?
Oh, I was about to say, in his own mind, no.
Never, even though he loses all the time. If he loses, he didn't really lose. It was rigged. It was stolen. I won the 2020 election in a landslide, but it was stolen from me. I didn't do anything wrong for any of these indictments, but it was the rigged Biden administration that is responsible for it. I had nothing to do with it. My behavior is perfect. That's what he's set up here. Two things. One, if the debate doesn't come off, he's set up to say, of course, we couldn't debate in front of this nasty, biased, left-wing commie network, ABC. So he's set up his excuse for not debating. Then if the debate comes off, and in fact he loses the debate, he'll say, no, I won the debate bigly, but it was rigged against me. It was all biased on ABC. CNN, which does the polling, is biased. The mainstream media is biased. I actually won the debate, but it's the swamp, the biased media that is telling you otherwise. So either way, Donald Trump can't lose. If he doesn't debate, he's got a built-in excuse. If he loses the debate, he likewise has a built-in excuse as to why he really won and really won big, just like he did in the 2020 election. So it's all up in the air, but Donald Trump has set himself up, as he always does, for an excuse no matter what happens in the debate.
What's the deal with this Jack Smith stuff, Dad?
Yes, I'm about to get to that, believe it or not.
I believe it.
Jack Smith filed what's called a superseding indictment. As the word implies, it is an indictment that supersedes, that takes over the original indictment. Now, what prompted Jack Smith to have to file a new indictment, Sam?
Judge Cannon, I believe, right?
No, that's in
Oh,
Georgia.
Judge.
That's a Florida. That's a
Oh,
wholly different case. This is the
this.
January 6th case.
Oh, Supreme Court.
Supreme Court, you got it. You're like a genius. Supreme Court, in this incredible ruling, which has no basis in American traditions and no basis in the Constitution. In fact, the framers were most afraid, their biggest fear of all in framing the Constitution was that a president would be like King George, become a dictator, become a tyrant. And they put in all kinds of safeguards to keep a president from becoming a tyrant. A president
Wait,
was
what are you
not.
drinking? I didn't see. Show the people what you're drinking.
What's that?
What are you drinking? I didn't. I missed it. LaCroix. Wow,
How about that?
pretty good.
I'm listening to our audience who says, I shouldn't drink so much diet soda.
There you go.
Anyway, so Supreme Court totally contravenes the Constitution, totally contravenes the most important intent of the framers. And even though these conservatives supposedly are originalists and strict constructionalists, supposedly hewing to the original intent of the Constitution. Leave that aside. So what they've given is essential immunity to a president in his official duties, and very broadly defined official duties. And so apparently what falls under this rubric is any kind of interaction between the president and anyone in his administration. In other words, he can do what he wants. The horrific example that was brought up, he could order Team SEAL 6 to assassinate his political opponents, and he'd be immune from prosecution because, as commander in chief, ordering the team to do what he says is part of its official duties. And so, what Jack Smith is worried about is the part of the indictment in which Trump is indicted for conspiring with Jeffrey Clark, an official in the Justice Department, to write a bogus letter to officials in Georgia, a fabricated letter trying to open up a fraud investigation. It would have come off, except the attorney general and every high official in the Justice Department realized, how illegal and immoral this was, and they all threatened to resign. That struck out of the new indictment because supposedly that is part of the president's official duties. Get this. This is just astonishing. In other words, a president could use his power over the executive branch of government to corruptly rig an election and get himself reelected, and there's nothing you could do about it because he'd be covered by Supreme Court immunity. If this decision had been in effect in the 1970s, Richard Nixon would have gotten away with Watergate, and our democracy may have died 50 years ago. And, it's in grave peril right now. So Jack Smith rewrote the superseding indictment to take out that allegation and to generally reframe the indictment. The rest of it doesn't include any new facts, but it's now framed in a way that he's talking about Donald Trump in his capacity as a political candidate, not as president, acting in all of these ways to illegally subvert the will of the voters in 2020. And of course, you can expect Donald Trump to respond to this. You can expect appeals. And all of this plays right into the hands of Donald Trump, even if he ultimately loses all his appeals. Why does this play into the hands of Trump, Sam?
Because he's gonna say, "Look, they're changing the indictment. They're out to get me no matter what. Even when
And
the
what else does it do in terms of when the trial is going to occur?
happened quicker.
It delays it forever.
Oh, it delays it.
To have a new indictment. She's got a rule on it.
Oh,
Trump appeal it. It'll go to the appeals court. Then it'll go to the Supreme Court. Even if he loses all his appeals, you're talking way past the election. So, in essence, we had the one trial before the election. What trial was that, Sam?
um,
Criminal
the
trial.
the New York fraud case.
Right. And what happened in that case?
Guilty, mother effer.
Guilty of 34 felony counts. The one trial that has taken place, and it's going to be the only trial that's going to take place before the election. We have never seen such a clear example of justice delayed being justice denied. And if Donald Trump gets elected, he'll just dismiss these cases, the federal case in January 6th federal case and the Florida federal case. And the only remaining case will be the Georgia state case, which is absolutely in chaos.
It's pretty remarkable if you think about it that Democrats pushed out Biden because he's too old, but Republicans have kept this Trump guy around even though he tried to overturn a free and fair election. It's a pretty crazy contrast, huh?
You've heard me say many times I can summarize American politics in one sentence. Republicans have no principles, Democrats have no spine. Although in uniting behind Harris, uh, virtually unanimously, they did show, that they grew a brain and grew a spine, at least in this instance. But Republicans have no principles. Uh, any party with a shred of principle would not be united behind Trump. Over 200 former Republican staffers of McCain, Bush, and I'm not sure who the third one was, Romney. More than 200 Republican staffers have said, we're good, loyal Republicans, but we can't support Trump. His own top staff, his chief of staff, John Kelly, his national security advisor, General McMaster, General Mattis, on, his Stephanie Grisham, his spokesperson. So many people close to Trump have come out against him, saying a second Trump administration would be a disaster for the country and a disaster for the world. We've never seen anything like this in the history of presidential elections.
All right, you ready to get to some questions, Dad?
I'm always ready. Now I have my LaCroix. How many viewers do we have?
5,583 according to my metrics.
Nice.
Um, remember, if you're a member, you donate, you get priority in the questions. Members' questions are posted in the community tab ahead of the show, where you can post your questions there. Just a reminder, we can't get to every question, but those questions get priority. And we have a lot of questions.
Members and donors.
What?
Priority is to members and donors.
I said that.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize
Oh,
that.
you're emphasizing
And
it.
donate.
Right. Your first question is from a member, Dad, the Spartan. They say, how concerning is Texas right now regarding the Attorney General? Are you familiar with that, Dad?
The Attorney General of Texas, Attorney General Paxton, I believe, got impeached. He's under criminal indictment. He barely escaped conviction in an overwhelmingly Republican Senate. Republicans in the House in Texas impeached him. He was one of the primary election deniers in 2020, responsible for trying to bring a case to the Supreme Court to overturn the results, not in Texas, of course, where Trump won, but in other swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where Trump lost. And now he's been launching so-called fraud investigations focused on minorities. And there have been some major complaints by Latino groups saying, we haven't done anything wrong and we're being unfairly targeted by these so-called fraud police and there should be an investigation. Good luck.
Remember, Alex Kawa says, do you think the DNC was wrong to deny a Palestinian American a speaking slot? For the record, the speaker would have used her speech to endorse Kamala, so they weren't disruptors.
I have no idea. I can't answer that question. I don't know who was a possible speaker, and you never know what they're going to say. You may think that's what they're going to say, but once they're up on that platform, they can say anything they want. They could be denouncing Genocide Joe for all we know. So I can't really comment because, as I always say, the devil is in the details, but I can understand why the organizers may have been wary of this.
Super chat from Harry Chittenden. They say, in light of Ukrainian advances and prisoner swapping, if the foreign success key does not turn true in time for this election, will it count for Kamala in 2028?
You know how reluctant I am to answer hypotheticals, much less a hypothetical 4 years out from now. But, you're A, presuming she wins this election, and B, of course, if she's the incumbent, presuming her health holds up, she'll be the nominee in 2028. But who knows what the state of the world is going to be then?
Yeah, it's a pretty tough question. Ukraine might not even be.
That might even not even be an issue.
Yeah, it might not even be an issue by 2028.
Who knows?
For Meta, let's hope. Let's hope it's over, right?
What's that?
I said, let's hope it's over by then.
Let's hope it's over.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my God, there's so much bloodshed.
Yeah.
I'm not a pacifist, but as I grow older, the more I understand the futility of war. That, typically the result of bloodshed is more bloodshed that doesn't solve anything. How long have the Israelis and the Arabs been battling? Since the turn of the 20th century. For over 100 years, they've been battling. And what does it solve, Sam?
Nothing.
Nothing. Same battles, same bloodshed.
For Meta What asks, what are we going to do about the undecided keys? Is it going to be a repeat of 2016 all over again?
I'm not sure what that means, a repeat of 2016. If that means I'm predicting Trump, I have not said who I am predicting. And you'll see, how I call the keys when I make my final prediction. Not long from now. And as I said, you're going to be right in the middle of that. We're going to have a special show the moment it's released.
There you go. Maybe not the moment, but the day it's released.
The day it's
The
released.
day it's released. Okay.
We're not quite nimble enough to do it at the moment.
Right. Dudley Murdoch says, since House GOP is now investigating Harris and Walz, will they impeach them? And will this investigating Walz and Harris flip the scandal key before the election starts?
Number one, they can't impeach Walz. Why not, Sam?
He's a governor.
He's a governor. He's not a federal official. Secondly, zero chance they're going to impeach Harris. They have no grounds. They don't have the votes. There's like a 3-vote, margin for Republicans. There's no way they're going to get every Republican to impeach Harris. Certainly not right before the election. Will just make it look horribly political. And remember, to turn the scandal key, it has to involve the president himself, and there has to be some bipartisan recognition of scandal. It can't just be pushed solely by a single party.
Matt Jacobson asks, deep red/blue states always elect the same party regardless of the keys. Were the keys deliberately designed to focus on criteria that purple state voters care about while ignoring the other states? That's not true. I mean, Reagan.
No, the keys focus on criteria that generally relate to how voters make their decisions. The economy, scandal, social unrest, those are not unique to swing states. Those are concerns across the board in America.
Right. And maybe recent elections, the maps have been pretty similar. But if you go back to Clinton or if you go back to Reagan, I mean, they were winning vice versa, deep blue and deep red states, you know?
Reagan won 49 states,
Right. Of
every
course.
state but Walter Mondale's home state of Minnesota,
Right.
which is not considered a swing state today.
Good point, Dad. Derek Taylor says, when did you make your 2020 prediction? I thought you were going to make your prediction after the DNC. Now it's after Labor Day.
Well, it's still after the DNC. I didn't say it would be right after. Remember,
Well,
coordinate.
people thought
I've got
that
to coordinate with a major, huge media outlet that I don't control.
right, but people when you said after the DNC, people thought you meant, the next few days after the
Oh, I
DNC.
thought, at first that might happen, but it's not going to happen.
Right. The gist of this all is what he just said. He has to coordinate with the biggest media, the biggest newspaper on the planet. It's not him.
Correct.
Let's just say that. How about that?
They don't listen to me. They'll
And yeah,
listen to me on my prediction, but they don't listen to me in terms of their timetables.
there you go. James LaGruta, member James LaGruta asks, what is the state of the social unrest and both foreign policy keys?
Well, the two foreign policy keys, as I've said for a long time, is uncertain. I haven't called the social unrest key yet, but I think when we looked at the keys, we had that one leaning blue, and it's still leaning blue, although I haven't made a final call on it. I want to see what happens in the first 2 or 3 weeks of school, which is another reason why to postpone the debate, excuse me, the prediction a little bit to see what happens, not the first day of school, but the first couple of weeks of school.
And what about the third party key, Dad? Is that officially true now?
Certainly looks like it's true in light of the disappearance of RFK Jr. And hopefully, many of you saw my standalone take on that. And it's now even worse than what I thought then. It was such a convoluted withdrawal. First of all, he didn't end his campaign, he suspended it. Then he said, in red and blue states, you can still vote for me because it doesn't matter. Unbelievable. And then he said, I'm going to take myself off the ballot in the swing states so you have a clear choice to vote for Trump. Did that happen, Sam? Did he get off the ballot in the swing states?
No.
Absolutely not. I think at least in 4 swing states, including Wisconsin and Nevada, he's still on the ballot. He cannot legally remove himself from the ballot. So, it was the most convoluted, the most fabricated, the most crazy withdrawal probably in the history of US politics. And as I explained, it doesn't necessarily help Trump. He was fading away anyway and was unlikely to turn that key. And remember, he's polling somewhere between 2 and 5 points. But remember, with a third party, you got to cut that in half in terms of their actual voting strengths. You're talking about very low single digits. And even if, say, 2/3 of them go to Trump, which is very unlikely because a bunch of them won't vote, it'll make a difference, in the low tenths of a percentage point. Contrarily, you have huge numbers of suburban women who will have a major say in this election, who may well be put off by RFK Jr.'s anti-vax stance. 70% of the American people think there should be compulsory vaccinations for children, and virtually every medical expert says if you don't do that, you are putting tens of millions of children at risk.
I have to say, never mind. I'm going to skip it. Diesel Seattle, thank you for your donation. We just talked about what's happening with the keys. We are at the whim of the New York Times. There's essentially that's the entire answer, right, Dad?
No. I also said I want to wait and see the first couple of weeks of school to see if there'll be some massive outburst of social unrest, because
Gotcha.
that could be a critical key.
Gotcha. Member Thord Gensek says, could this election literally go well until December due to the GOP contesting it?
Yes and no. I think the election will be decided before that, but will the GOP bring legal challenges that could go well into December? Absolutely. Uh, Although I think, again, like in 220, they'll be quickly dismissed. They lost 60 cases. They lost every case but one inconsequential case. They lost before, 80 to 90 judges. They lost before judges appointed by Republican presidents. They lost before judges appointed by Donald Trump. Fine, they allowed to do that. But the problem was they weren't willing. They're the law and order party, but they weren't willing to abide by law and order and go with the decisions of the American legal system. Instead, they resorted to all of these allegedly illegal means to try to steal the election. Slates of fake electors, pressuring Mike Pence, pressuring state officials, inciting an insurrection. Now, can that happen again? Absolutely. But remember one thing, Donald Trump was president until January 20th, 2021. This time he won't be president and he won't have any of the instrumentalities of the presidency at hand. So, he sat for 3 hours as president while the insurrection raged, people were hurt and killed. Joe Biden's not going to do that.
X Mike wants to know, you just touched on, you want to wait until you want to see what happens with these protests at campuses. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think there's going to be big protests and the protests will be exploding across the
said
country?
that he was leaning blue, and I haven't changed my mind about it, but I
There you
haven't
go.
made a final call.
Daniel Cornejo says, if there is social unrest in other countries, but no social unrest in the United States, would the no social unrest key be labeled as true or false?
False. It's got to be social unrest in the United States. And my book, which I hope you'll all buy, Predicting the Next President, The Keys to the White House 2024, makes that clear. We're not talking about social unrest in Venezuela or Russia or Iran or anywhere else.
Speaking of your books, I Love You Mad Hurry asks, when is your upcoming book on conservatives coming out?
Sometime in early to mid 2025. It's still in process at Notre Dame University Press. It's not 100% guaranteed. It's still awaiting approval by the board, which I fully expect, but which should happen within a week.
Notre
And then
Dame.
we should have a better idea of the publication schedule. But university presses are very, very slow.
I mean, especially in this day and age, they must have no money left, these university presses.
They have no money left.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that Notre Dame is publishing a book about conservatism.
Well, that's the thing. That's why there's a little bit of uncertainty as to whether the board would approve it. But it would be incredibly valuable for Notre Dame Press to kind of go against stereotypes and publish this book.
Natalie Discord Mod with a $10 donation. Thank you so much. They say, I unearthed the Senate keys and user Ellis slash Searton would like to know if the Senate keys he updated can be reviewed live. He sent them to Alan's email.
I don't recall seeing them, but I can't tell you how many emails every day and miss a lot of them. But, I think they're 30 years old or so. So it would take a pretty extensive exercise in time and energy to update them. And I don't have the time and the energy right now. I'm swamped between the show, the stand-ins, finishing the revisions of my book. I'm starting teaching. I'm doing speaking engagements, and I'm old.
There's your answer. Jim Blower says right now 538 has a 59% chance of a Harris win. I think the chance is 93% or 38 out of 41. Since your keys show a Harris win, well, we don't know that yet, Jim.
No, we don't know. I haven't made a final call yet.
Right.
A lot of people have misinterpreted me, and I want to make that crystal clear. You got to wait. Be patient. It's still going to come out 2 months before the election. So there'll be plenty of time to digest, to debate, to discuss my call. Whether I make it, tomorrow or a week from tomorrow is really not of great import, right, Sam?
Correct. I just wanted to say I was thinking about Discord right there. If you want to join our Discord, it's linked in the description of our video. So is our Reddit page. I just want to give a shout out to the people who are our mods on our YouTube chat, in Reddit, and in Discord. Thank you to all of our mods. Say thank you, Dad.
Thank you all. I don't know what a Discord is, but it's probably something good.
Do you know what a Reddit is? You know what Reddit is, right?
Yeah, I've seen Reddit. That's, where people put all kinds of comments.
You're not wrong. That was not an incorrect statement. Wasn't
Yeah,
the most accurate description of what Reddit is, but it wasn't incorrect also. So, hey.
not bad for an old man.
Formetta What says, I overheard that Netanyahu was on the phone with Trump about ceasefire deals, and Trump is telling Netanyahu to reject it. Should we spread the word about Trump that he's been doing this? Is that true? I don't know if that's actually been
Yeah,
reported.
I've heard that rumor as well. I don't know if it's been documented, so I wouldn't spread it until it gets documented. I wouldn't put it past Trump to do that. It's very similar to what Richard Nixon did in 1968. The other president who was the biggest enemy of democracy. Do you know what Richard Nixon did, Sam,
In terms of what?
in the election of 1968, in terms of ceasefire, foreign agreements, stopping a war?
Vietnam.
Yes. He intervened in the negotiations between North and South Vietnam to try to stop the war and said, don't agree. Let me win, because if you make an agreement, it's probably going to cost me the election, but I'll win and I'll get you guys in South Vietnam a better deal and we'll end the war quickly. Did Nixon end the war quickly?
No.
No, it went on for 5 more years. In fact, he resigned as president in 1974 with the war still raging until finally, under Gerald Ford, the war ended with America losing.
You ever see the SNL skit where Dana Carvey plays, I forgot who, some big anchor of the 80s and 90s, and he's reporting about all the different ways Gerald Ford, like he was prepping for Gerald Ford dying. Have you ever seen that skit?
No.
It's really funny. He's like, I'm not going to redo it. Just watch it if you're out there. It's funny. It's a funny SNL skit. President Broccoli says, why didn't the Abraham Accords count as a foreign success for Trump?
They kind of came and went without much attention or acclaim. Remember, it's got to be a big splashy success, and it wasn't clear what those accomplished.
Is the 2024 United States presidential election the hardest for you to pick?
No, the hardest was probably it's up there, but I wouldn't say it's the hardest. It's up there with 2016 and 2000.
Yeah, I would say 2016 and 2000 are way harder than this, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Member Miles Wolf wants to know, what can we do to combat revisionist history in school curriculums?
Boy, that's a really important question because, particularly in places like Florida and Texas, they're rewriting history to make believe, slavery wasn't so bad. Oh, the slaves learned all these skills that were useful to them. And oh, these race riots that black people were massacred in, it was both black and white people. And of course, there was very little discrimination ever in America. And certainly any discrimination that once existed is long gone. And we're a pure meritocracy. where race, gender, religion, ethnicity makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. Never mind that the strongest supporters of that point of view, the evangelical Christians in the Southern Baptist Convention, won't even let women be pastors, much less the idea that we're a pure meritocracy. So what you've got to do is vote for people who uh, want to tell the truth about our history, run for local school boards, or support candidates who want to tell the truth about our history for local school board positions.
There you go. Member John L. Sullivan says, the difficult Afghanistan withdrawal is getting a lot of news attention in the last 2 days. Will this affect your call on the foreign/military failure key?
It could. I'll have to see if it has legs. It's been getting a lot of attention because it's the anniversary of the withdrawal. I want to see if that's, a 2-day story or if it has legs. Another reason to, keep the powder dry for another week or two in terms of the final prediction.
We kind of already touched on this, but maybe there's more you want to say. We'll see. What happens to states where RFK Jr. is still on the ballot?
Yeah, as I said,
We don't know.
maybe he didn't know, or maybe he knew and wasn't telling the truth. I don't know which is the case. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he didn't know, but his whole strategy was premised on staying on the ballot in red and blue states where it didn't matter if people voted for him, and getting off the ballot in swing states. Well, the fact that he's on the ballot in 4 swing states at least vitiates the fundamentals of his strategy.
Here's an interesting question from member Suki Bomb. They say, at what point do we consider the Gaza situation a military failure? And what would it take for this to become a military success? Because it sure is already a humanitarian failure and a stain in our collective human history. Now Netanyahu is dragging the whole region into war with his crazy assassination on foreign soil. So I guess that is an interesting question. At what point is it just a failure? I mean, even if...
Well, we'll see. I'm giving it another couple of weeks, but it doesn't look good. I think we had that key leaning red. But what could turn things around, and I've been saying this for months, what have I been saying, Sam, can turn things around in Gaza?
A peace deal.
Peace deal, ceasefire, and hostage release.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. If it happens fairly soon, right, it could be a success. But at a certain point, it's like there's been so much damage done, it's hard to see it as a success,
It's got to happen soon, obviously, for me to call that key that way. And it could, who knows? But we're dealing with 2 very difficult actors, Hamas, terrorist organization on the one hand, and the very belligerent Prime Minister Netanyahu on the other hand, the Donald Trump of Israel. His belligerence is hurting the Democratic administration, and I'm sure he loves that. Remember who promoted him? It was the right wing in the United States.
Ben Valverde Lendertz asks, could SCOTUS overturn the 2024 election?
Conceivably. I don't think it's going to happen. They pretty much stayed out of the 2020 election. Now they seem to be more aggressive recently than they were back then. But, not impossible, but incredibly unlikely that they would brazenly just overturn an election.
Fiercely Independent asks, does RFK Jr. to be precise, does RFK Jr. dropping out help the Libertarian Party nominee Chase Oliver, considering some RFK Jr. supporters are libertarian leaning?
At the very margins, I don't expect that candidate to get even 1% of the vote, no matter what happens with RFK Jr.
President Scrooge, one of our many presidents in the chat, asks, I'm not sure why Ukraine wouldn't be a major foreign policy/military success. Putin planned to take the country in 1 week, but with U.S. support We are 900 days in with Ukraine, still standing and making gains into Russia.
I agree with that. If it was me, simply calling the key based on what I see, I would call it a success. But that's not broadly how it's perceived. It's very controversial in the United States, and many, many Americans are tired of this seemingly forever war draining American resources, resulting in humanitarian tragedies on both sides.
Beat Me by 37 says, Dr. Lichtman, I know you were a big Hubert Humphrey fan. Let's sing it, Dad. We're going to vote for
Vote for
Hubert.
Hubert Humphrey.
Nice. I am not. I wasn't alive then. Um,
You weren't even close to being alive. You
right,
weren't even a gleam in my eye.
right. Is there anything that could have been done differently for Humphrey to beat Nixon in 1968?
I don't like to answer hypotheticals, but I don't see how any of the keys could have been changed by anything Humphrey did or didn't do.
Stealth wants to know which three keys can MAGA try to overturn the easiest before the election?
I suppose they could try to overturn the scandal key. That's the one most in their control. And some of our audience has speculated, about a possible impeachment attempt, but I don't think they can do it because, as I said, it's got to hit Biden himself, and there's got to be at least some bipartisan recognition. Even though all the Democrats voted against the conviction of Bill Clinton when he was impeached, lots of Democrats still condemned what Clinton was doing, even though they didn't believe it rose to the level of an impeachable offense.
Right. Here's a critical question. We don't just ask softball questions here, folks. We ask critical questions too. Here's a critical question from Josh's Bookish Voyage. They say, if 2000 election was stolen through voter suppression, why haven't the keys failed during more extreme tactics, i.e., Jim Crow?
As I think I've answered that before, Jim Crow did affect two anomalies in the Keys. 1876, in the waning days of Reconstruction, when white supremacist so-called Redeemer governments were beginning to take over in the South, there were conflicting governments in three states: Florida, it's always Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. And that was resolved by a congressional commission of 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. So, Sam, how do you think an 8-7 commission voted on these disputed votes?
8-7.
8-7 for the Republic. We'll never know who really won that election. And then in 1888, when Grover Cleveland lost by a hair, by less than 1%, won the popular vote by less than 1%, but narrowly lost the Electoral College. It was again the effect of Reconstruction because the suppression of the black vote in the South massively, not on the margins like in 2000, but, the majority of the black vote being suppressed. The Democratic Party was moving into a one-party South, and Cleveland won these southern states by huge margins, anywhere from 70% to 83%. Margins, we almost never see anymore.
Christophe Lirola says, can you go through the elements considered for the short-term economy key and the scandal key and where they fall?
Well, I'm not going I can, yeah, I can. I've already called those two keys. I've called the short-term economy key as true because to turn the key against the White House party, there has to be an election year recession. And typically it's the National Bureau of Economic Research that calls recessions. Or another definition is 2 consecutive negative quarters. Much too late for a recession to settle over the country. It takes a while, months, to know whether or not a recession has occurred. So that key, barring some, tragedy that we've never seen before, is true. And what was the other key? The scandal key?
Yes, sir.
As I've said, Republicans, you've heard me say this many times, Republicans have tried for 4 years as hard as they can to pin something on Biden and have come up empty. Their supposed smoking gun witness of his corruption in Ukraine, by the way, when it wasn't even in office, but or when he was vice president, but leave that out. Their smoking gun witness, Mr. Smirnov, was arrested by the FBI for lying about Biden's involvement. And what kind of propaganda, Sam, was he actually spreading?
Um, Burundi propaganda. Look, every time you ask me that question, I'm going to come
I
up with a
know
different country.
it's Russian propaganda, of course. So no, there's no way the scandal key is going to turn. Remember, there's got to be at least some bipartisan recognition of scandal.
Um, Member Casey Adams asks, given the rise of election denialism and efforts to undermine trust in electoral systems, how can scholars and policymakers work together to restore confidence in the democratic process?
That is a terrific question, and it's not easy. As scholars, what we can do is speak out, write, persuade, lecture, do things like this show, which, is has one of its objectives the upholding and protection of our democracy. And what all of you can do is work for and vote for candidates who truly believe in and will uphold our democracy, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats.
Um, would Trump be better off refusing to debate for the election? Would Trump be better off refusing to debate for the rest of the election cycle rather than risking the negative repercussions?
Well, the debate will not turn any key one way or the other, but stepping outside the keys, the last thing Trump ever wants to happen is to be embarrassed. And his biggest nightmare is to be embarrassed by a woman of color. So that could explain all his machinations about the debate and why, even though the debate was agreed upon, I'd say at this point there's a 50-50 chance Trump won't agree to debate.
Nate K wants to know, have both charisma keys been true in one election?
I can't think of one.
Rian Cormo
It's
said,
very rare to turn the charisma key. Only, 6 or 7 candidates since 1900 have turned the key. Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, because he was a national hero. Remember, it's charisma / national hero. And to be a national hero, you have to be a leader in war, like Ike, not just someone who performed heroically in war, like George McGovern or George H.W. Bush or John McCain. So Eisenhower, TR, FDR, JFK, Reagan, Barack Obama. That's it in over 120 years.
people are making fun of me in the chat for my slip up by almost saying erection. Look, guys, I asked like all these questions. Like my tongue gets tied a little
And
bit
he's just
sometimes.
had COVID. Give the guy a break.
Right, I'm not even fully recovered from COVID yet.
You got COVID brain.
Oh, COVID brain.
How many viewers do we have now?
6,526.
Oh, so it's grown as we're approaching the end of the show.
So it's grown as we're approaching the end of the show.
Didn't someone just say that?
Oh, right. Rian Cormo says, given the intense political polarization of the modern U.S., do you expect that most election calls in the coming decade or two will come in September?
The ultimate hypothetical.
Right.
Obviously I can't know that. But let me say this. Our political polarization, and I've come to realize this recently, is way overstated. It is primarily polarization among the elites, among political candidates and their donors and backers. There's much less polarization among the American people. Take what's considered the most polarizing issue, abortion. In fact, there is very broad consensus. Over 60%, in some polls, two-thirds of Americans believe that abortion should be always or usually available. It does not polarize the public. Or immigration, considered another hugely polarizing issue. The vast majority of the American people believe that you need both to have border security and a comprehensive immigration reform package that includes a pathway to citizenship or gun control, another supposedly polarizing issue. The vast majority of the American people believe in reasonable gun control measures like universal background checks and red flag laws.
Right. Good point, Dad. Um, Eddie Ed says, do you think uncommitted delegates will cost Harris the election? Would it be considered social unrest? I'm not sure what he means. Do you know what he means?
There are a handful of uncommitted delegates, I think less than 1%, hardly an indication of social unrest. So I don't see that as affecting any keys. And it's a very, very minimal percentage of uncommitted. It's amazing, that Harris should be getting 99% plus support. That's just extraordinary, just a few weeks into her candidacy.
Adam Miron says, hey, Mr. Lichtman, I heard that all campuses are making sure that strict rules are enacting strict rules so that we don't have a repeat of the spring. Do you think this will help key 8, the social unrest key?
Could, but rules are made to be broken. And at least, going back to my experience, when I was a student in the 60s, uh, student protesters couldn't have cared less about rules, but it's a different time. And we'll see. We'll know in a couple of weeks when I make my final call.
Sandra Rankin, thank you for becoming a member. Your question can be answered on Wikipedia or on 13 Keys Tracker website. Daniel Vo, can the 13 keys be applied to smaller races? No, they don't work as well.
Hey, is Wikipedia still inaccurate?
I don't know. I haven't checked it in a while.
I don't recommend anyone looking at Wikipedia. It's misrepresented my 2016 prediction. I know some of you in the audience have tried to correct that, and Wikipedia is being absolutely obstructionist and publishing false information. So don't ever get your information from Wikipedia.
Okay, never mind. 13 Keys Tracker is a very simple tool to understand
Yes.
the keys and how they fall. Brennan Ziegler says, I saw that the incumbent has never won, or the incumbent party, I guess, has never won when both the foreign/military keys were false. Can Harris still win if those two keys are false, but at least 8 keys are still true?
The system does not prioritize one key over another. So long as, I like to put it in terms of false keys, so long as fewer than 6 keys are false, doesn't matter which, the incumbent party is still a predicted winner.
There you go. Thank you, James Patrick. Thank you, Sandra, for your donations. Thank you, Mike Hughes, for your donations. For your donation. Yeah, whatever. Let's see. Next question. Thank you, Sandra, again. Member J.B. Brown says, how about the Senate and House? Will Dems win the trifecta? We know you don't have a prediction system for that, but what are the odds in your view?
I don't have odds. I don't have a prediction system. I have a gut. I think the Democrats will retake the House. And I think, again, take this for what it's worth. It's just speculation. The Senate will come out 50-50, and whoever wins the presidency will control the Senate because the vice president will have the tie-breaking vote.
Member J.B. Brenner asks, I'd love to hear more thoughts on the Democrats elevating AOC. Do you think she would make a good Harris cabinet member or senator, or is she best in the House? Could she deliver Texas in 32 using the 2020 Georgia strategy?
So we're talking about 2032. talk about, ultimate speculation. Let me say this. She had a breakout speech. Maybe not as spectacular as Barack Obama's in 2004 that led to him to become president, but she is a rising star within the Democratic Party. Certainly, could become a senator. I don't know how much longer Chuck Schumer in New York is going to go on. She's, of course, from New York. And she could certainly help the Democrats with the Latino vote everywhere. Let me say one thing about Texas and
Texas.
Florida. Whatever you may think of the polls, and I'm not a poll watcher, nonetheless, it is surprising that in those two Senate races, the Democrats are well within even the statistical margin of error, much less the bigger margin of error. They're trailing the incumbent Scott in Florida and the most hated man in Washington in Texas. Who's the most hated man in Washington, Sam?
Teddy Cruz.
Ted Cruz. Colin Allred is only 2 or 3 points behind.
We're getting a lot of donations and questions about the keys. Guys, the keys will come out after Labor Day. We do not have an exact answer for you two as when because um, of
Gotta
editorial.
be patient.
Yeah.
They'll still be 2 months before the election.
Yes. Be
And,
patient.
most people are on vacation now until after Labor Day. It's not a good time, to make a spectacular pronouncement. But it'll be here before you know it.
Dad, do you pronounce it Labor Day or Labor Day?
Certainly Labor Day.
Right. Don't you think that the U in British English is useless? What's the point of adding a U
I
to
have
all the?
no idea what the point of that is,
It's
but it's
useless.
tomato, tomato.
Yeah, I know, but um, if Colin Powell had been the Republican nominee in 2000 against Al Gore, would he have been able to secure the national hero key similar to how Eisenhower did?
Quite possibly. Again, the devil is always in the details. And, you know, we've had generals who look great on paper. And then once they tried to campaign for the nomination for president, they totally bombed. And so we don't know what would have happened with Colin Powell. It's pure speculation. But I
Um,
was a big admirer of his back then and totally turned when he made that bogus speech before the UN about weapons of mass destruction to support George W. Bush's obsession to invade Iraq, one of the great mistakes of American foreign and military policy.
I just want to say before you wrap up here, we have 6,500 people watching, but only 1,800 likes. If you'll throw us a like, that would be great. If you want to keep hanging out and chatting, I have an after show, a Lichtman Live after show on my channel. The link to that is in the description of the video, this video. Um, do you think, how many more questions do you want, Dad?
3 more
Three
questions.
more. Do you think John Tester's strategy of not endorsing Kamala and trying to distance himself from the Democratic Party will be an effective or weak strategy in keeping his Senate seat?
I've always thought you can't run away from the president of your own party, but she's not the president. And Montana is a solidly red state. He's trying to pull a Joe Manchin, really. Joe Manchin got elected from another solidly red state, West Virginia, by distancing himself from the Democratic leadership. So that seems to be what Tester is doing. Uh, I'm no expert in Montana politics. I'm not in real position to dispute that.
Wait, you're not an expert on Montana politics?
No, but we should head out to Montana again. It was a lot of fun, right?
Yeehaw.
Remember you went to a rodeo, didn't you?
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah. And
Um,
you saw a bear.
huh?
Didn't we see a bear?
Yes.
Yes.
A brown bear, not a black, or a black bear, not a brown
A
bear.
black bear, right?
Yeah.
Not a grizzly.
No. Um, Crazy Zoo Lady wants to know, what are your thoughts on the Texas judge that's putting a temporary halt to the Biden keeping families together immigration plan? Do you think people see once again the Republican Party stopping any immigration reform?
Absolutely. I see it. If you want to find a conservative judge who's likely to support Republican talking points, you can find them in Texas and you can find them in the Fifth Circuit.
Good point, Dad. Really excellent point. Would H.W. Bush have won the 92 election if Perot wasn't so strong and didn't flip the third party key?
Again, you can't pull something out of history and presume everything else would
Right.
remain the same. But let me say the third party key counted among the six keys, exactly six keys needed to predict H.W. Bush's defeat. I can take a couple more.
Couple more?
I'm feeling strong here.
You're
My
feeling strong?
cry is, holding me up.
Hey, gotta love the LaCroix, right? Have you heard and or read the book written by Rachel Maddow entitled Prequel, An American Fight Against Fascism? And what are your thoughts about it?
I haven't read it, so I don't have thoughts. I've seen her commentary, and I mostly agree with it, not 100%.
What's your fondest memory from your 2006 Senate campaign, and what inspired you to run?
I was inspired to run because I thought we needed someone who had a different background. There wasn't a single educator in the United States Senate, and I thought that would benefit. My best memory was meeting and talking to voters.
Our YouTube mod, Sean, asks, if you had to guess which is more likely to go blue in November, Arizona or Georgia?
Oh, I have no idea. I'd say equal chance, maybe slightly leaning towards Arizona, but I don't have a model to predict that. So that's just speculation.
Can you say Georgia in like a nice, slow southern drawl? Like Georgia.
Absolutely not.
Why not? Try it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I
Oh,
don't do Southern drawl.
how was mine? Georgia.
Yeah,
No, it's more like,
you're the guy who's got all these degrees in communications,
right.
not me.
Actually, it's more like Georgia.
Whatever you say, I'm not
Okay.
trying.
Okay. Um,
Last question.
Last question. That's a lot of pressure.
All right, two more questions.
No. Let's do last question. That's fine.
All right.
We answered that already. I don't understand that one.
These
We
have been
answered
great
that
questions.
already.
They're not softball questions. It's not like Trump going on Fox or Harris going on MSNBC.
Right. Um, where were we? Oh, Sting Like a Bee asks, hi, Alan. I'm so impressed by the simplicity and the fantastic capability of your 13 key criteria for predicting U.S. presidential elections. Can artificial intelligence be used to learn how to make the judgments on close calls and then also predict future presidential elections?
That's a great question. And I'm hardly an expert on AI, but I've begun to use it and I've been very impressed. And I think it's quite possible AI could be helpful in this regard. Sam, I always want to stay on top of the latest trends, right? I want to
Right.
be right in the swim
Right.
of
He
what's
does.
happening right now. And I think, obviously AI is the trend of the future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say, I know this is not context of the question, but I'm still getting a lot of people who say they know how to call the keys better than I do. Maybe you do, doesn't matter. If you want to set up your own prediction system, I encourage it. But if you want to use the keys, you can't freelance on what you think, however smart you are. And maybe you're way smarter than me, but it doesn't matter. You've got to stick to the system itself, to how the keys are defined and how the keys have been answered from 1860 to 2020. You can't come up with some new way of calling the keys, unless, as I said, you want to develop your own prediction system. And I absolutely encourage that.
All right. That's a good way to wrap it up. I want to give some shout outs to some people in the chat. Raw Vegan Goddess says, love you, Professor. Thanks, Sam. I watch almost every show. That's pretty good. Ross Goldberg says, good night. Melissa A.H. says, thank you, gentlemen. Valander says, thank you for the stream. Patrick Murray says, good night.
Good night, my friends. And the other thing I've been getting from time to time, because I've said a lot would have to go wrong for Harris to lose. Oh, you're just a Democratic tool. You're just biased. Of course, when I called Trump in 2016, people say, I'm just a Republican tool. You've gone over to the dark side. You're totally biased. Or when I called Reagan in 1982, my first call, people didn't know me. They say, oh, you must be a Republican tool, calling Reagan when he's so far down in the polls. Remember, keys are predictions, not endorsements. They are purely impartial. I've called as many Republican as Democratic victories. If I was just biased and voted whatever, if I was conservative or liberal and just voted my political implications, I'd be wrong half the time. The
People who
beauty of,
say that don't know what they're talking about, Dad. You don't need to waste your breath on this,
all
in
right,
my
I'm
opinion.
giving some slack on that. I'm done.
I mean, no, I want you to finish your thought, but I just want to give you.
I'm done with my thought. As I
Okay.
said, if I was predicting based on my political inclination, whatever they were, I'd be wrong half the time and be useless as a forecaster.
Right. They obviously haven't looked into you at all. And, criticizing somebody without doing any research on them is pretty bottom of the barrel, if you ask me. Let's give a few.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, I know you do. Let's give some shout outs to a few more people. Jay Torres, Azalea Youssef, Christopher Standard, Dr. Ash, Janet Ford, Benjamin Meneses. If you want to keep hanging out, the Lichtman Live post show is linked in the chat and in the description of the video. Say goodnight to the people, Dad.
Good night. You'll know soon enough what my final prediction is, and God only knows whether there's going to be a debate or not.